Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, we are so glad y'all are here. I remember when the Central Park Five, now called the Exonerated Five, were acquitted and released from jail. Um, then President Donald John Trump was asked about them, and he said that they probably did something to deserve what they did. So, or the crime, they deserve something if it wasn't that particular crime that they were accused of. And if you don't know, there was a woman, a jogger, who had been killed, but there was no physical evidence linked to any of the five men being there. There was no evidence that there was more than one attacker. The actual semen found in the victim did not match any of the five young men. And the four confessions, because they had gotten four confessions, um, all of them were inconsistent with each other and were given after prolonged periods of police interrogation. Um, Nothing linked them to this crime. And they spent years in jail. And before he was president, Donald Trump put out a full page ad against them. And I bring that up because one of the Ten Commandments is that thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. And when we say, well, let me first start with every organization, including schools and colleges, should have a mission. They should have a vision. It should be a guidepost to let us know kind of, what we're trying to do. But they should also have values, a system of non-negotiables that help us make decisions and kind of guide behavior. It's just a good practice to have values. And so when the state of Louisiana decides that it should be, or a requirement, not you may, but a requirement that public institutions, and just to distinguish, public institutions are ones where our all of our tax dollars are going um, to fund these institutions. That in public institutions we should put the Ten Commandments on the walls of schools. I think it's important that we be careful. And I wrote this book in 2020, and it's still my favorite one of the books I've written yet. And that is because I get a chance to detail just how steeped my Christian faith is. Um, it is not something that I think that needs to be bragged about, but it is something that I think sometimes people misunderstand about me. Um, Interestingly enough, I am so comfortable in my Christianity that it does not bother me at all that other people have different faiths. And I detail that in the holy part of this particular book, because when I was 7 years old, I had a friend. Her name was Kalia Eldridge, and Kalia was Muslim. And Kalia had invited me to the mosque, and I got a chance to go to the mosque with Kalia. And everyone was so kind to me, and I remember so vividly how good the food was, and it was fish, and I remember that was the first time I had bean pie, and the only thing really that stood out to me as a difference necessarily was that all the women had their hair covered. And, going to church where I go to church, um, we spend all day on Saturday. I detailed that experience in here too, getting our hair done. So the last thing we about to do is cover it up, you know. In fact, you wearing a hat because you didn't do your hair. And I remember when I invited Kalia to my church, I remember who my Sunday school teacher was at the time. I'm not even going to call her name because she is still living. And this is not about her or her behavior. It's a larger point I'm trying to make. When Kalia came to my church, it was the one of the first times that I felt shame around my belief system. It was obvious Kalia was Muslim because Kalia wore a hijab. And I went to Sunday school, and there was talk about you not being able to find your way to heaven if you did not believe in Jesus. Well, it's not that Kalia did not believe in Jesus. She's just not Christian. So the story of Jesus is a little different. In fact, I remember being surprised that they actually talked about Jesus at the mosque, but as a prophet. Then when we go into the sanctuary, it's about an hour and 15 minutes later, Kalia and I are sitting, on the very first little, as soon as you walk into my church, you walk into the front, and there was a little bitty seat that's made for like one adult person, and Kalia and I sat in that seat together. It's still there, still laid out the same way. And I tell the story here. Kalia and I are sitting in the seat together. We're both seven-ish, and all of a sudden, there's this language in the sermon about you cannot find your way to heaven unless you give your life to Christ and believe in Jesus. And it's very clear to me, even as a second grader, that is what is happening is that Kalia is trying to be converted to Christian. And what you might not know is that I actually was not a good reader. I am an exceptional reader now, and I can read fast, but I couldn't read very well when I was in the second grade. And so I needed help. I believed that what I was experiencing was wrong. I felt bad for my friend who was Muslim, and I wanted to learn more about Islam. So I had some of my siblings help me. They didn't know they were helping me, but I was using the Encyclopedia Britannica. We had an entire set at the house. And while I was using it, I was trying to learn more about Islam. And one of the first things I learned, because let me just say that one of my favorite songs is by Kirk Franklin and Rance Allen, and it is something about the name Jesus. And what I hate about that song is the opening where it's like, we're afraid to say Christ and, not Allah, not Buddha, not this, not that. Well, Allah simply means God. It is just God in Arabic, and it was one of the first things I learned. And it caused me that this a seminal experience that I'm not saying is right, but it's a seminal experience that guides kind of how I think about religion. If I were born to Kalia's parents and she to mine, it is likely I would be Muslim and she would be Christian. And there are enough people, I believe, and I believe then and I believe it today. There are enough people in my second grade class who believed nothing, whose parents were not practicing any faith, for us to try to convert if conversion is our thing, rather than Aaliyah, who I got to see pray 5 times a day as a second grader. And I still feel the same way today. In the last 20 years, the United States used to be something like 90% Christian when you would do a survey. And now we are hovering around 70% Christian. And I don't know the reasons for that. I have not studied it. But what I can tell you is this: things like deciding that you are going to force people to be Christian instead of practicing permission evangelism is part of the reason why people are turning their backs on this whole religion thing altogether, and especially turning their backs on the idea of being Christian. If Christ wasn't such a critical component of how I believe my life has turned out to be beautiful and loving and safe, I don't know that I would follow, because let us just back up and say, if any leader in any organization does not align to the mission, vision, and values of that organization, first of all, we would never allow them to lead it. We would never allow them to lead that organization. So let's just start there. And then, two, it's probably helpful if the leader of an organization understands the mission, the vision, and the values and can articulate them and make decisions based on the mission, vision, and values. I have an amazing amount of recall. This week, I got a chance to be at the 44th National Assembly for the Links Incorporated, and the keynote speaker for the opening session was the Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes, and I had never had an opportunity to hear him, and I got a chance to see him in person. And I will tell you that if there's one thing I admire is a person who can speak about a topic for a lengthy period of time, stay on topic, and come back to a callback and tie it to that organization. And the man did it with not a singular note. It was all the inspiration that I never even knew I needed. And I bring him up because when I consider what inspires me, I'm curious to know what inspires you about your leaders. I don't know that most people can even tell me what the 10 commandments, most people who would be advocating for putting the 10 commandments on a wall could tell me what they are. And if we're going to require that we put the 10 commandments on the wall, you tell me how. We make students like, I will even back up further and say, have you seen the walls of an elementary school classroom? There ain't no room for no poster, no 10 commandments. If I was a teacher, that little, okay, I gotta put it up. My 10 commandments will be listed on something this big, because my job as a teacher is to make sure that every child has a safe, I put on something like this and stick it on the wall. Because what you're not going to do is to make me create spaces that are not safe for children if I'm a teacher. And if you are a teacher and you intend to create spaces that are not safe for children, and I'm centering Kalia, I honor that I am centering Kalia in this moment, then you should not be a teacher. You should not be a teacher. Because look, I brought my little Bible here. The first one, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Who we talking about here? Because 30% of US citizens are not Christian. So who we talking about? Who we talking about? Um, I would think that the people who are requiring that you put these things on the wall would be the ones who would have to tell me what they are. Tell me what the 10 are. Because I think we might have a problem with the one that says, thou shalt not commit adultery, based on who our leaders have been. Who these same people, these same lawmakers who are passing this kind of legislation would be advocating for a candidate and subsequent winner of the 2024 presidential election who absolutely has been proven to have committed adultery multiple times. Um, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. We have talked about that one. What about honor thy father and thy mother that thy days may be long upon the land? How do you explain that to a child who does not have a father and a mother? How do you explain that to a child who has a mother who is abusive or a father who is abusive? How you explaining that? Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And see, here's the part that capitalists don't like to talk about. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. Keep listening. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. You gonna turn this whole capitalistic system off? You gonna turn it off? Or you gonna turn it off on the seventh day? Because the last I checked, y'all want Chick-fil-A to be open every day of the week. You ain't gonna be able to go nowhere and do nothing. You ain't gonna be able to make no money. putting this on the wall, then you need to be one of the ones who does it. Um, excuse me, how about thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain? What about that one? Do we think that one 2 Corinthians and holding the Bible upside down? Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I am the Lord thy God, and am jealous, God. And this is about not having a graven image. Now we done made sure our name was on stuff. We done made golden statues to show at the national convention. Man, listen, I empathy cannot sit on a bed of hypocrisy. I don't know how many times I have to say that. But I also want to say that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. You don't even care enough to care about this. And so, for those of you who know someone who is saying, I ain't telling anybody who to vote for, but I will tell you this. I will tell you this. If we can engage more people in the process, you can't convince me that most people are going to vote for a person who has been found to have raped a woman. Most people ain't going to do that. Now, I ain't going to say most of the people who vote won't do that, but most people are not going to do that. That is why we have to, when I look at Project 2025, which says it is going to get rid of the Department of Education, get rid of the Department of Justice, get rid of the Environmental Protection Agency, make it so that you can't use words like difference or fairness or, making people feel like they belong, which is truly what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. I am not alarmed, but I am concerned. And I'm concerned because people are not going to read this 900-page plus document. I have talked to a person who gets to meet with some of Kansas City's richest citizens to just raise the alarm for over a year about what is in this particular leadership mandate, the conservative promise, and I can't even get him to crack the spine. If you just read the first 4 pages, you'll see that whoever gets elected to the presidency this year, if they are over on if they embrace the ideas of the conservative promise, the entire democracy as we know it will be gone. And they didn't just create this thing. This has been revisited and reworked since like the 1980s. And when I consider Moses, who happens to be a murderer, and you can say that Moses was right to have killed the Egyptian who was attacking the Hebrew. But why look around? Huh? Why look around to see who was looking before he did it? I ain't saying Moses should still be held culpable to it. But if you believe that Moses shouldn't still be held culpable to it, then that means that you believe in the blood of Jesus Christ, which then means that you are not bound by any of this, that then you are embracing all the things that Christ has said, which is, how the heck do you put up on the wall the 10 commandments and then don't make lunch free and affordable for children in K through 12 education? How do you do that? But the Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes said, if they can create the conservative promise, we can create the 2025 powerful promise. And I was inspired because he gave a couple of suggestions. He said, why don't we make it such that if we're going to start making the draft automatic again, why don't we have voter registration be automatic? If you got ID, you can vote wherever you live. Why don't we, if we can have a powerful promise, why wouldn't we do something like making sure that all children have something to eat if they are going to public schools. We were able to do it during COVID. Why not now? For the 4,000 cities that have water quality that's worse than Flint, Michigan, who still does not have clean water to this day. What if there was a minimum mandate? You know, somebody told me 2 weeks ago that one of the hospitals here in Kansas City, that for the child deaths that they have in childbirth, that the deaths, 9 out of 10 of those babies are Black babies. That's 90% if you didn't do the math. If we pro-life, we make there be an account for that. Why can't we get together and pull something like that together? You know, I love the idea. And here's what I will say, because it's also Pride Month, y'all. And all of a sudden, I started seeing all these posts about rainbows being of God. You know, if you believe, I do not believe this with you, but if you believe that homosexuality is sin, and if you believe that we are all born in sin, and if you believe that Christ died for our sins, then that means Christ died for the gay people. And y'all need to stop being hateful, because for every bit of social progress, it has been every group that has been left out and left behind that has bound themselves together, that has linked up to be able to fight hatefulness. And I invite you that if you think children need to know the 10 Commandments, then you teach it to your children. You teach it to your grandchildren. You teach it to the children you mentor. Because this idea that I can force what I think, feel, and believe onto others is not serving us well, beloved. And if I think about everyone that I've brought to the body of Christ, it has been because I have met them with love. That I think about where I am, and I open my heart and consider how I am saying I'm sorry so I can heal people. How I am saying I love you so that I can heal the wounds that people have in their hearts. Not how I can say, look at you and how wrong you are. Because for every day that I live, the reason I wrote this book, baby, is so that you can know with everything that seems good and acceptable and pleasing, I have a multitude of sins to account for, my own stuff. And I don't need to be pointing out the stuff of others. And I understand that how it could feel diabolical. Since Harrison Buckler said that, child, everybody been saying diabolical. I know how it could seem evil for me to insist that there's no space for a country that is majority Christian to not be able to express. Because people who are close to me feel like that I'm telling them not to express their Christianity. Here's what I'll ask you. Are you doing it for you, or are you doing it for ego? Because God don't need your help. God don't need your help. Y'all try. Look, there's not a leadership book I have written that is not based on the principles of Jesus, because it's the leadership lens through which I have been reared. But why I gotta say it? What's my purpose for saying it? Am I trying to make myself seem better than? Am I trying to win over the Lord? Because I don't need to. The Lord loves me as I am. And the Lord loves everybody as they are. And I think sometimes as we are out here um, sitting on the sidelines, putting our heads down, worrying about ourselves, um, clapping and applauding, things that I guess might seem benign, to just put up the 10 commandments in the classroom in Louisiana. I just want us to think about what has it ever been like for you if, let's say, you have an allergy and you go to a family event and they don't have anything for you to eat. Let's say you don't like to get up early and you belong to an organization and all the meetings are early. Let's say that there's a certain type of music you like and appreciate, and you go to a party and they ain't playing none of that. They're playing something else. If we think long and hard, we all know what it's like to be left out and left behind. Step into those shoes. And as you step into those shoes, I want you to imagine what it would be like if it were you. And I think that we need to center, if you happen to be Christian, what Jesus said about how we treat the children. Because he did not put a qualifier that said how we treat Christian children, just said children. And I'm telling you, this idea that we're gonna make folk feel left out because their parents are Hindu or Buddhist, or this 4% of our nation is atheists. We can, through mission, vision, values, address behavior. You know how I know? Because we already do. So why, what would be the motivation of someone to do something like this, except for to be hateful? It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got work to do.